15 locals carrying baskets and a whole lot of greys. Walked in there. So what's happening is, stop 1 are going to be dropped in here, stop 2 at the top here, and stop 3 near those pools there. Okay?
White soldiers on the move in Rhodesia, one of the flashpoints in Africa. Tonight, the war against communist-backed guerrillas, a struggle the United States is watching with mounting anxiety. Good evening. In the last few days, there's been a dramatic hardening of Carter administration rhetoric chastising Russians and Cubans for intervention in Africa. Alarmed by the grisly rebel invasion of Zaire, ostensibly with Cuban support, although Cuba denies it, President Carter has warned that communist adventures in Africa could jeopardize vital negotiations on strategic arms control. Today, opening the summit meeting of NATO in Washington, Mr. Carter said the alliance could not be indifferent to events in Africa. One area reported to be of crucial concern is Rhodesia. The white Prime Minister, Ian Smith, has moved towards black majority rule by including 3 black leaders in a transition government. But 2 rebel forces, backed by communist arms, continue to attack from bases in neighboring Mozambique and Zambia. One explanation of Mr. Carter's tougher line with the communists is reported to be his fear that they will increasingly exploit the Rhodesian situation, putting the U.S. in the position of choosing between the rebels and the white Rhodesians. Tonight, an intimate look at the kind of warfare going on in Rhodesia. What follows is an excerpt from a BBC report on the special anti-guerrilla force of the Rhodesian army, trying to hunt down and destroy invading rebel bands. The reporter is Richard Lindley.
Most of them, 52%, are not Rhodesian at all. They're mercenaries, professional soldiers fighting to a 3-year contract. Men like Lieutenant John Cronin, an American, sacked from military academy, volunteered for the Marines and badly wounded in Vietnam, wants to fight for South Africa when his Rhodesian contract is up. Sergeant Paul Abbott, from Bath in Britain, 11 years in the Rifle Brigade, but got fed up with Northern Ireland politics. 7 months in the French Foreign Legion, now fighting Rhodesia's war. Ken Blaine, former pilot sergeant in the British Marines, resented the low pay and lack of flying time, arrived in Rhodesia from Britain this January. Lieutenant Roger Carloni, at last a Rhodesian, despite his Italian parentage, a national serviceman who signed on, awarded the Bronze Star for bravery. These are the men who make up Rhodesia's elite military unit, the men who raid the guerrilla camps in Zambia and Mozambique. Under the Anglo-American proposals, all the foreigners here would be immediately discharged. Why did they join?
Well, we have a number of foreigners over here, from Australia to New Zealand. We have Frenchmen, we have some Hungarians, a lot of Englishmen, and a few Americans. And they come over, I think, probably more for the action than anything else.
No one likes to see a country taken over by communists, and especially terrorists. I just cannot stand terrorists.
The guerrillas are certainly applying pressure. We saw this bus blown up by a mine, but most guerrilla attacks go unreported because of censorship. We learned that around Shabani, guerrillas have destroyed all the heavy equipment at a major construction site, blacked out the whole area for 7 hours, including the vital Shabani asbestos mine, and most effectively ambushed a convoy of 3 police Land Rovers. The Major isn't taking any chances. He's a bank manager doing a 56-day stint as a territorial. Today, he's guarding Special Forces police as they investigate a guerrilla attack.
But as the event occurred at about 11 o'clock this morning, they could quite easily have arranged a reception committee for us there. Planted landmines or an ambush, so it's best to check it out before we actually approach the vehicle.
Locate the vehicles. What do you find, bro? Because it's just down the drag there.
The driver describes how guerrillas fired a rocket at his delivery van.
And then he fired. What I saw that he missed and went up. Because he was pointing right here.
Yes.
Then the thing went right up above.
And that was where it struck?
That's right.
I see. What faction were they? What? Were they Zipra or what?
They say they're Zandler.
Zandler?
Yeah.
All right, you're fine. Heading which direction? Yes, we found tracks of two. The indications are from the spoor we found at the scene here are the two terrorists responsible for this alleged attack this morning. We call them Makandungas, which means a man who moves by night, a defiler. And we're on tracks, and we'll stay on tracks. And as you see, it's getting a bit dark now. But what will happen when we can't see the tracks anymore, my lads will sleep on the tracks tonight, and then tomorrow morning they'll continue.
The police trackers lost the trail at the river, but a Fireforce ambush in the same area produced results.
Come on.
These two men had been in the same area as the guerrillas. Apparently, they'd blundered out of the bush straight into the Fireforce ambush while the guerrillas had got away. They'd first been spotted by one of the observation posts in the area.
The OP kept saying over and over again, well, listen, I can see 4 people standing under a tree. And I can see 2 of them definitely armed, and 2 of these others are green trousers.
Which are the men you brought in?
Which of the men we brought in?
You've handed them over to Special Branch now. What sort of information do you get out of people like that? Do they talk?
They will. Normally, if they're only contact men, they'll break very easily. If they're tourists, it'll take a little bit longer. But the fact remains that regardless of what they are, contact men or tourists, they will be able to give us information on that group.
After 2 days' interrogation, the men were released, law-abiding citizens after all. They might easily have been shot rather than captured. Already this year, Rhodesia admits more than 70 innocent civilians have been killed.
Well, if we can recognise them as civilians, i.e. they hopefully stand up and raise their hands, then they're okay.
But what happens if they don't? What happens if they're running, frightened?
Okay, if they're mistaken for tourists, then there's not much we could do about it. We've got to play it as safe as possible for our people.
Is this a winnable war?
Well, that is something very difficult to try and assess. Any terrorist war is virtually unwinnable, really. We are inclined to be too defensive, I feel. And I think this is something we've all been saying as soldiers for the last 10 years, possibly, that our attitude has been too defensive and not offensive enough outside the country. And I think that is basically where the problem has lain for the last 10 years or so.
What would you like to be doing then, from a military point of view?
Well, I feel we should certainly be doing more external operations. And that is where you've got to hit the problem at the source of the problem. To wait for the problem to come to you doesn't work. I mean, this has been proven many a time in the past.
Killing them is no problem at all. Finding them is the difficulty. Their method of winning is to go through the people, get the people on their side so they can establish bases of support in the rural areas. And that way, we don't certainly have enough troops to contain the movements. We can't saturate an area. Certainly we tried that in Vietnam, and we lost badly in that attempt.
So winning militarily isn't possible?
In a guerrilla war, and I could only quote Mao on this, it's as long as the people are on your side, no. But this is where this war has taken a different turn, because we have, I would say, definitely the majority of the population on the government side now. And this is why I think we definitely are winning.
A few miles from the Fireforce camp, in the Madziva tribal trust land, there's a battle going on. An itinerant team from the police and internal affairs is waging psychological warfare on these African villagers. Today, the district commissioner has come to win their support for the internal settlement in Salisbury.
They must remember to ask these boys, these Gandangas, when they come, what are they fighting for now? As at the 31st of December, there's going to be majority rule. So what are they fighting for now? Aren't they fighting to give it to the communists?
31 December majority rule.
vari kutsanangurai pano kuti zvipinde munzeve dzenyu muvudze magandanga kuti muchagwira chinyi.
All right, now the outside world have said this is not on, okay? They've said they're not going to listen to the internal settlement that we've got.
Dzimwe nyikavo dzokunzewo vamwe vanoruvengo nenyika yedu vari kuti hatinei nazvo, hatidi kuteerera nezvamuri kutaurana muno mukati menyika.
But this is an agreement between us people that have to live in this country. We've got to live here. It's up to us to make sure that the communists don't come in and take it over.
It's rather late in the history of black-white relations in Rhodesia for the DC to ask for these villagers' support, particularly when the war makes life so difficult for them.
Yeah, I mean, he's asking whether he can go out
to go and get them. Well, he should have organised for the cattle to be brought in before the curfew.
Winning support for the new government, the same government that authorises soldiers to shoot at curfew breakers, that's not so easy.
They want to see the difference between the internal settlement and this communist settlement, the bush of the terrorists.
And what do they think? Do they understand the difference, do you think?
After explanation, I believe they understand.
Do they want to come and listen to you?
It's sort of mixed feeling sort of thing. But sometimes you get a good response at the end. They start singing and it's quite a good show.
How would you describe this meeting?
This meeting? Quite successful.
You say you're doing this really to win the hearts and minds of the people here. Does that mean you've lost them at the moment?
No, well, the African people, they on one person's side and then they're on our side, then they're on the Ter's side. It depends. Like the Ter's, they terrorize them. That's why they go onto their side. And then next day you come in and talk to them and then they're on your side. That's how it goes.
At dawn one morning, without our escort, we set out to discover what rural Africans really think. Because they shelter the guerrillas they call the boys, rather than report them, these people could go to jail for life. They took a considerable risk in talking to us at this secret rendezvous. You aren't frightened of the guerrillas?
No, we aren't. They are very kind to us, and they really are like us, and they're not cruel.
I mean, the security forces say that the guerrillas force you to give them food and that they make you very unhappy. I mean, how do you feel about them?
The guerrillas are our brothers. We like them. They give us injections. If we are ill, you can go to them and tell them, well, I'm ill of such a disease. Then they give you an injection.
Medical treatment?
Yes, medical treatment. They treat us. And they are our brothers. We are not frightened of them. We just stay with them, laugh and talk. Anything we like about them.
What is it like with the defense forces? We know they're very active here.
Yes. Oh, well, let's say the soldiers come. Once you hear the Land Rovers coming, you start panicking. And when they come, they can take the girls and the boys, take them to their camps, start torturing them.
To have the full weight of Fireforce fall upon your village must be a terrifying experience. No wonder the innocent run to hide in the bush and sometimes get shot. This call-out was very close indeed to where we talked to the guerrilla supporters. Now a group of 18 armed men had been reported travelling through the area, and Fireforce had responded. The greatest killing force we've got is how Combined Operations describes Fireforce. And these men of 3 Commando hold the record for guerrillas killed since 1968. But very often, all the Fireforce sound and fury signifies nothing at all, except more expense that Rhodesia can't afford. Looks like another one without a contact then.
You asking me for a quote? It's too early to tell.
How many does this make it?
7, 8 lemons in a row.
How does that make you feel?
Get used to it, you know? It's all part of the game of war.
It's terrible when you're that close, unfortunately. But, hell, I can't do anything about it. And just, all we can do is depend on the information.
You think they're there still?
Well, they're in the hills now. They're about 1,000 meters from the area that we swept south. They're probably in there just watching us. But it's a resident group. Anytime you get a group that goes to a business center once every 2 or 3 days, 4 days, you can figure it's a resident group.
From John Cronin, we now got a clue about the nature of the secret war going on around us in the bush.
But we can put a call sign in there as soon as the area is unfrozen, in other words, thawed. There's a group in there now that's holding it for us, and as soon as they release that area, then we'll put our own people in.
Only if called in on special radio channel 22 can Fireforce enter a frozen area. Otherwise, the secret unit already out there risks being shot. Fireforce depends for its success completely on the men out in the bush in their hidden observation posts trying to pinpoint the movements of the guerrillas. Now, when these men are brought back to base in helicopters, they land outside the camp. The commandos never see them, they communicate only by radio, and we are not allowed to photograph them. But we have seen enough of them to realize why there's so much secrecy. They look exactly like the guerrillas they're hunting. They wear denims, they carry the standard communist gun, the AK-47, and they're black. And there's an irony here, since these men are part of a unit named after Rhodesia's greatest white hunter. They're the Selous Scouts. Now, the presence of these black Rhodesian soldiers here, dressed to look exactly like the guerrillas, means two things. First, when there are reports of atrocities allegedly committed by guerrillas against the rural population, we cannot be absolutely certain who is really responsible. And second, when it's admitted to me that here in territory where guerrillas from the Zanla army are operating, the Selous Scouts are passing themselves off as men from ZIPRA, the rival nationalist organization, then we can only speculate that the Rhodesian government is trying to foment those clashes between the rival nationalist groups that they say are already happening. The Rhodesian security forces say that Zanla guerrillas are fighting ZIPRA guerrillas. Now, what do you think is happening?
No, that is not true. Actually, I've seen Zipra boys and Zanla boys. They don't speak bad of each other. Whenever the Rhodesian soldiers report that Zanla and Zipra are fighting, it is not so.
Just as the Selous Scouts are trying to drive a wedge between African villagers and guerrillas, just as the white government has co-opted some black politicians to try and split the nationalist ranks, so the white-run army is recruiting black soldiers to fight the black guerrillas. These are new arrivals at the Rhodesian African Rifles depot at Balabala, near Shabani. Not all of them realise what it means to cross that barrier into the barracks. But the motivation is sometimes pretty obvious.
You're a bit thin. Where have you come from?
Coming from Gwelo.
From?
Gwelo.
Gwelo. What have you been doing in Gwelo? Eh? What was your job? No work?
Yes.
Is that why you've had no food in your tummy? Eh? Eh? Doesn't understand. Big chap. How old are you?
I'm 19, sir.
19?
Yes, sir.
What standard of education have you got?
Grade 7.
Grade 7?
Yes, sir.
It's good. Why do you want to come and be a soldier?
I want to help Rhodesia.
You want to help Rhodesia?
Yes, sir.
What about helping Zimbabwe?
No, sir.
Eh?
No.
Why not?
I like to be a soldier.
You like to be a soldier?
Yes, sir.
So it doesn't really matter what it is, you just want to be a soldier?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I see.
More and more, the boys in the bush on both sides are black. Balabala is churning out hastily trained soldiers, what the whites disparagingly call three-month wonders. Short as their training is, they're already marked men, cut off from their roots, in mortal danger.
Once he joins us, it's very difficult for him to go back home at the moment with the terror presence that he's got there.
What would happen if he did?
Well, normally the terrorists, when they find out somebody is in the army, they then more or less stake out his house, coming back every now and again. As soon as they find him there, they then murder him and the rest of his family. They sometimes write letters to recruits here at Balabala and tell them, look, we know you're in the army now, either come home within a week or we are going to write off your family.
When we were at home, they were using to beat us, killing some of the civilians without any case. And they used to just to take a person by force murder.
When black nationalists like Sitoli and Muzorewa are joining the Smith government now, when so many blacks are joining the Rhodesian army, what do you think the guerrillas are going to do?
I think they are continuing to fight, and they are even destroying more things so that this government won't get any supply from the people.
Is this agreement going to make them give up?
Yeah, I reckon it is.
Why?
Because they've got an excuse for coming back in and saying, right, you know, what the hell are we fighting for anyway? They don't know what they're fighting for originally, but you know, they come back and say, right, let's go back to our claws. That's all they want to do. They want to sit outside their little kaya and watch their piccaninnies grow up and do their greys and all the rest of it. And that's what their life revolves around.
So this agreement is going to bring them in?
I think it will. I think it'll have a profound effect on the number of tourists now in the bush.
Ben, the whole point about this agreement in Salisbury was that it would lead to a ceasefire, would lead to the end of the war. Any sign of that?
No, I don't think so. I think it will increase. And then they're going to bring more in, and I don't think it will end. Not in this country.
If the Salisbury Agreement fails to make the guerrillas surrender, whites will ask why Mr. Smith has conceded black majority rule. But if they do come in, then the army will simply not accept them into its ranks.
You can't really accept that at all, because it's just like taking a battalion of IRA in Northern Ireland and sticking them with the security forces within Northern Ireland. How can you accept something like that?
If that does happen, they might as well disband the whole army. Because I don't think that anybody in the Rhodesian army, white-wise, is going to work next to the bugger that he was fighting 2-3 years ago.
I don't think I'll be here when that happens, quite honestly. And I'm afraid quite a lot of people will be leaving when that does happen.
What are you going to feel, Ben, working for a black government? Is that something that you think about at all?
Yeah, I thought about it, but I won't work for a black government, because I didn't come into this country to fight in this country and sort of win the war and then end up working for a black government.
Isn't that what you're going to be doing next year?
No, next year I'll be out. Pack my bags and I'll leave. Because I'm not sticking around here, not under a black government.
Second wave onto the vehicles.
What's it supposed to be the same again?
Yeah, I don't really know. What have we got on that other vehicle?
There's Coombe, Colony and Kid.
Okay, like you say, just let those three go. Stops 2, 3 and 4.
We'll go 5 and 6.
We'll go 5 and 6. Okay.
On the road before dawn, Fireforce hurries south. Just as long as they can see the horizon, the helicopters will fly by moonlight.
And apparently, what I can gather over this, no one's initiated the contact yet, so hopefully they'll get something.
Last night, a commando patrol discovered a guerrilla camp. Now, Fireforce is trying to get there before there's a contact.
I'll fucking try if got a capture. One capture. Then we're going back.
Did they say one capture?
Yeah.
Okay, they got one capture and they're following up Spore at the moment, so it's not a complete washout.
Are we going back?
And it's the best we could do at the moment. Sorry about that.
But the patrol lost track of the guerrillas. They waited by the road to be picked up with their capture.
Smile. Smile, come.
How did you make the capture? How did you make the capture?
He gave himself up, just gave himself up. He surrendered. He pulled out over as we were shooting at him. I surrendered. So we missed. This guy was running away, in fact.
Yeah.
He's lucky he's not dead. Tied enough round at the back.
That same day, Fireforce finally caught up with the guerrillas, not far from the morning's contact. It was a hard-fought encounter. At the end of it, the commandos had killed 8 and captured 3.
You have a good day.
And the tours were situated in a village and on the outside. We just swept through, and there were just contacts, swept back and forwards, and there were contacts just carrying on all the time.
There's a spook by a tree, and we thought he was dead. So two of us went up to him, and just as we were about 5 feet from him, he threw a grenade at us. So we took cover, and it just went off, and a small piece hit.
And you shot him?
Yeah.
At last, Fireforce had got what it calls floppies. The army says these guerrillas are criminals, not worthy of the name soldier. Just so, the Rhodesian government discounts the guerrillas' political leaders. But until Rhodesia recognises that any real settlement must include them and the boys in the bush, the war won't stop. The security forces have killed 4,500 guerrillas. But today, there are 4,000 more in the country. They won't surrender.
This was the one who threw the grenade at one of my officers and his machine gunner. He lay dead initially. And as they came up, he rolled over on his back and threw that, hit one of my people right in the forearm, but he'll be right. These fellows those are burn marks on them.
How did that happen?
Well, they got a little too close to an airstrike as it came in.
These burns were caused by Rhodesian-made napalm.
Quite a lot of people would say these weren't terrorists, but they were freedom fighters. How do you feel about that?
No, I can't imagine what the actual rationale behind that is. They are guilty of terrorism. There's no question about it. They brutalize the locals. As far as being a freedom fighter, I don't actually know what the freedom bit is. I can't understand that. They're terrorists. They always have been. And at least we've eliminated 11 of them. And that's just great. That's what Fireforce is all about.
That view of the Rhodesia struggle was part of a report broadcast recently on the BBC program Panorama. The reporter was Richard Lindley. The United States and Britain have been trying to bring the rebel leaders, Joshua Nkomo and Robert Mugabe, into talks with Smith's Rhodesian government on the belief that no permanent settlement is possible without the guerrillas. The rebels have refused and vowed to intensify that armed struggle. Washington and London hoped their peace plan would win the support of South Africa. But over the weekend, South African Prime Minister John Foster urged them to drop the plan and support Smith's transition government. So, more fighting seems in prospect. That's all for tonight. Jim Lehrer and I'll be back tomorrow night. I'm Robert McNeil. Good night.